Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to Take 5 Art for the month of December. This month the prompts are brought to you by the lovely Roxane, who is Sincerely Lengthy on Instagram. And I'm going to start off with the prompts here. So the first prompt is markers, and I have some Tombow markers here. And I also end up using some other colors from some other markers, which I'll bring along in a while. The second prompt is acrylic paint, and I'm using these acrylic paints by Vicky Boutine. I've got toasted marshmallow, sweet buttercream, and vanilla frosting. These come in a set, and I love using the three of them together because they create quite a beautiful vintage looking palette. The third prompt is dip pen, and Lord knows I do not have one of those, so I thought I would go old school and use a feather and some ink. See how that goes. The fourth prompt is a gel pen, and I have my Jelly Roll pen here. And the fifth prompt is something vintage, and I started off thinking I was going to use this as the vintage prompt, which is just a music sheet, but I actually add a few more things that are vintage, and it actually ends up looking like quite a vintage piece in the end, which I'm really happy about. So I'm really excited to bring you this month's art layout. So let's get started. I am using this heavy-duty watercolor Cosmo Cricut Traveler's Notebook by Julie Comstock, and I'm going to start off with these Tim Holtz stamps, very vintage-like, and I thought that they would create a little bit of a beautiful border around the page. And I'm doing a double page layout as usual. I'm using some sepia-colored brown ink, and I'm just using this kind of scroll stamp to go along the border, and then I'm going to switch out the stamp for this diamond pattern. So I think straight away that gives the background a lovely vintage look. The next thing I'm going to do is just going to tear up some strips of the music paper. I did decide to give definition to each of the strips by inking the edges as well, and I did leave the edges quite torn to add to the vintage effect. But before I stuck them down, I did decide to go ahead and add the acrylic paint prompt, and I'm using the toasted marshmallow here. It's quite a dark tan, so what I'm doing is just brushing it on quite light and doing kind of sort of like a dry effect with my brush. I did start off a little bit heavy and I didn't like that. I'm going to go over that with a little bit of the white, and I'm also going to actually cover some of that heavy parts with paper, but just a little bit gives that little bit of vintage color to the pages. Here we go now with the sweet buttercream. This is like a lovely peach color. This is actually one of my favorite colors to use. Not much left in this bottle, and the bottle's already quite small to start off with, which is very sad. So what I'm doing is applying the blush color to the edges, and then the white and the toasted marshmallow to the inside to give that vintagey look. And then I'm coming along now with the strips of music paper and just adding it to the areas where I'd applied too heavy the yellow color. And then after that, I'm just using a little bit of the white to blend in the edges of the music, so it creates kind of like a cohesive background. Going ahead now with just inking the edges with that sepia brown color. That looks really good. Now I'm coming in with some cartridge paper. I am about to stamp an image, and I have this beautiful stamp from Kaisercraft Miss Empire. I liked just the head of the lady, but I also liked the full image of the lady, and I thought I was just going to use one or the other, but I did end up using both, one for each of the pages. And I'm using these Tombow colors, and I'm just doing a swatch for you now. Don't have many of these Tombows. Tombows are quite expensive here in Australia, and I have only bought them singly, and I've usually bought just the colors that allow me to do skin tones. So I'm going to go ahead here and do a little bit of skin tone. I am totally not a shading person. I would do this I'm getting better in watercolor. Definitely would not do this with marker. Only using the marker here because it's a prompt. I just don't think I do a good job here. So I'm going to skip over most of the shading and coloring. So please forgive me. This is also where I reached for more colors in the brush markers to add to the costumes of each of the girls. Alright, so after that's done, I'm going to go ahead and fussy cut and ink the edges. And I'm just going to think now about placement and the kind of story that I'm trying to tell here. Now, as usual, I like to add a little bit of script to the background, and I think this adds the vintage feel. So far, it's looking very vintagey, and I'm really happy with this background. And I'm just trying to think of how I'm going to place these girls and the quote that I'm going to be adding. In the stamp set, there's a word that says artist, and I thought, well, this girl on the left, she could be the artist. So I kind of attached that word to her. And then also my eye is attracted to that Eiffel Tower, and I thought, oh, that would look good in the bottom left hand on the right hand side page. But of course, I put it at the top for some reason, so strange. And it doesn't print out too good because of the acrylic paint. So I kind of thought that didn't go very well. I didn't like that. So I'm going to go ahead now and stamp the girls in the position where I want them, because there's a little bit of background in each of the stamps. So if I stamp the image onto the page, I can then go ahead and attach the cutout of the girls, and then they'll still have the background that I didn't fussy cut around, if you know what I mean. It also helps to remind you where you want to place those images. So now we come to prompt number 3, which is the dip pen. And holy moly, am I glad that I wasn't born at a time when you had to use feather as pen, because I do such a bad job here. I ink up a little bit of paper to make sure that it looks sort of like vintagey, and I am going to hopelessly try to write a quote here using this ink and this feather, and it's really awful. The ink just spreads and it's just not sharp, and I really don't like it. The only reason why I'm doing it is because it's a prompt. So I tried, you guys. I really did try. I did try with some of the ink from the re-inkers with a different color. It wasn't any better, so I decided to just stay with that original one that I had done. And as it dried off, it just kept spreading and spreading, and just wasn't really happy. And so I did decide to add the feather, because what was I going to do with the feather once I'd finished with it? It had already been bent and used up. So I thought, let's just add the feather. That's fine. That can be another vintage prompt. And I'm just going to go ahead now and add the quote. And I hated all 3 versions, but I was going to add it anyway. And then with my Jelly Roll pen, I decided to go around the outline of the quote, and the Jelly Roll pen was all dried up, so I had to throw it away. So I ended up using this metallic gel pen that I had in my stash, and I just went around each one, and I don't know, it's all right, I suppose. It does the job. I'm using the rest of the metallic gel pens here just to outline the girls' dresses and add a little bit more texture to the coloring that I'd done originally, and just inking up the edges some more to make it look even more vintage. And pretty much this is my layout for the month of December. Thank you so much for joining me, everybody. Go ahead and hop on over to see what the other girls have done for this month. I can't wait to see what they've done and what their dip pens look like and how much better they do at this than me. It was definitely fun though, and I really love my page. So thank you, Roxane, for these awesome prompts. I hope you guys enjoyed watching me fiddle around with this. And if you guys decide to have a play and challenge yourself, please make sure that you tag us using the hashtag Take5Art on Instagram. I'd love to see what you've done, and I'll definitely comment on your posts. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you in my next video.